So yes, absolutely correct. I'm talking today about the Cleanaway ResourceCo joint venture facility. It's a process engineered fuel plant. It's been built and in place now in Western Sydney at Wetherill Park. It's the largest facility of its type in Australia, but importantly it's also the very first facility built in New South Wales under the New South Wales EPA waste to energy legislation, which gave us a bit of fun. I'll talk about that later, as Garth alluded to as well. But we are now coming up to our first anniversary of operations, so that's what I wanted to talk about today, a little bit of what we've discovered along the way, some of the challenges, and I've got a request for some help from all of you as well as we go through. So before I get started too far, let's talk a little bit about PEF, what process engineered fuel is. Ultimately, we're looking at an outlet for non-recyclable dry waste. And the focus is really on calorific value, it's on energy content of that material. But what we're really aiming for, we really want to see is non-recyclable material. So we're taking in treated and untreated timber, mixed and contaminated plastics, mixed and contaminated paper and cardboard products. We're realists as well though, so a lot of the material coming in is coming as a mixed form. So we're also taking rock and soil, concrete, brick, construction demolition waste in general, because that brings all of that energy content with it. But yes, ultimately we're looking at a diversion from landfill opportunity here, where recycling is not possible or not done for some reason. So from a flow perspective, ideally we're looking at recycling and resource recovery first of all, as we've just seen in the hierarchy. The step beyond this then, and for material that doesn't go through a resource recovery process to start with, it comes to a crossroads really where most of that material historically has gone into landfill. What we're introducing here, what we have introduced into New South Wales is an option to pull that material further back up the waste hierarchy and recover the energy content in that material. So we know we're never going to get a nice clean stream of this dry material coming through. So in addition to a PEF processing facility, we've also actually got quite a lot of resource recovery going on inside the plant. It's really only the last couple of steps of the plant that are about producing PEF. Everything prior to that is blending and sorting, but it's also resource recovery. We are pulling more than 20% of the waste stream out, converting it into commodities and into products that go back into the marketplace. So there's a really good value coming from that in terms of resource recovery as well as the creation of PEF. So our customers are cement kilns. We have agreements with about a dozen cement kilns now, both domestically and internationally. The bulk of those are in Southeast Asia. Australia has got less than a handful of cement kilns in operation, and Southeast Asia has over 100. So that's where the market really is. We are moving as much of that material as we can into domestic sources, of course, just from a cost perspective and also to try and keep that waste local. We are replacing coal, so the fuel source goes into the cement kilns and replaces coal. And the cement kilns are very, very complex and extremely conservative pieces of infrastructure. They're trying to produce an exceptionally consistent product, and they've got a lot of safety and cost implications if they get that wrong. And so as a result, they're also looking to us to provide them with a very consistent source of fuel. What we do know is that the waste coming through our gate is not consistent though. So a lot of the work done through the plant is about blending and sorting that material. Every one of the kilns we have, every one of our customers has a slightly different recipe that they're after. They're after a slightly different energy content in the material, and some of them have got exceptions to types of material that come through that process. So we've spent a lot of time and energy developing those recipes and understanding exactly what needs to go through to which customer. But we do know ultimately that the one thing we are aiming for is a consistent output from a very inconsistent input. So there's a lot of work to be able to get there. So PEF production. So through the production, we're replacing about 100,000 tonnes a year of coal burning in these cement kilns, roughly equivalent to about 20,000 cars a year. People like to talk about cars per year. So 20,000 cars a year coming off the road as a result of the work we're doing. And that's just the direct benefits. On top of that, there's quite a lot of indirect benefit. So this material is no longer going into landfill. It's not consuming space in those landfills. It's not producing methane. But also, most of the material and the target material for our plant is actually exactly the same material that, until recently, has been sitting in trucks on its way to Queensland to go into landfills there. So we're looking at a lot of indirect benefits as well. So the opportunity is huge. So the middle section there's quite a number of kilns, mainly in Europe, that are designed around 90% alternative energy usage. That's quite a specific design though, so the sites though are built to take that type of material. And most of our customers, in fact most of the cement kilns around the world, are already in place and have been for several decades. What we do know though is that getting those facilities to a level of 25 to 30% alternative fuel usage is quite easy. The infrastructure change is minimal to get there. And that's our target. So Southeast Asia and Australia, the average usage of alternative fuels is 5%. So that's our target market, that's the opportunity, and we are already well on our way to raising that number, certainly with our target customers, but even lifting the overall average across the whole area. A little bit of detail about the site. So we're operating on a 21,000 square metre site, and 9,000 square metres of that is under roof, under cover. We've got 50 people working there at the moment on rotating shifts, processing about 150,000 tonnes per year of inbound dry waste material. Now in the next couple of months we'll move to 24/7 operation, and that will lift our throughput to 250,000 tonnes. That takes us up to licence capacity, and very much looking forward to getting there. There's a huge market available, so we've got a few other projects in the pipeline that we're looking at. The site was funded in part through the Federal Clean Energy Finance Corporation, but also through the New South Wales EPA Waste Less Recycle More program. One of the things we built primarily to test the outbound material was an on-site laboratory. The original design was just to test the outbound material, testing that recipe to make sure we've got the calorific values right. Interestingly, that lab is also now doing a huge amount of work on inbound material. So being the first facility of its kind in New South Wales, what we discovered was there's a lot of pent-up demand of dry waste materials that don't, or historically haven't had an outlet outside of landfill. So we've had a lot of people coming forward and saying, look, we've always wanted to recycle this or to do something with it. We've tested the recycling markets and can't find an outlet, and all we've had as an option was landfill. So we're testing some very weird and wonderful things in that lab as we've gone through the first year, things that have never had an outlet other than to go to landfill. This is an overview of the site. I'm not going to talk in too much detail about that other than to show that it's high complexity. What you can see across the bottom of the site are 13 bunkers. So as we go through our blending and sorting process, it's those bunkers that are filling up with commodity. So we're stripping out steels and plastics and a few other things, aggregates and bricks and concrete. And that's giving us that sort of 20-25% commodity removed from the waste stream that we're feeding back into the market as products and also as commodities for recycling. The other thing I wanted to point out on this slide, and coming back to that point of pent-up demand that didn't really have an outlet before, is the shredder at the front of the line. So the first step in the process is to shred everything to get it back to a relatively consistent sizing for the sorting and blending. And by the fact that we can trace the waste as it comes through the gate and also it goes through that shredder, we're actually able to offer a certified secure destruction methodology for customers that never had an option otherwise. Historically, that material was either buried in a landfill and compacted, or shredded and then fed into landfill. We can actually track that right through the plant now and provide certified secure destruction for those customers, as well as a diversion from landfill option. So that's proving to be quite a strong market for us. So this is the fun bit, the timeline. Quite a lot of work done up front, but the key point here is that between the state significant development application and the development consent was more than a year and a half. And that time was spent negotiating between local and state and federal government agencies, but also a lot of time spent in interpretation of the New South Wales EPA Energy from Waste guidelines. And what we found through that process was that even the people who'd written those guidelines didn't necessarily have a really clear view of exactly what they were meant to do. So there's a bit of working together with the government to get there, but certainly a few challenges along the way as we started designing to one interpretation, and then had a different interpretation come out of the woodwork to change the design. So that was a bit of fun. So diversion. So this is a bit of an update on what we've done across the last year. So the three streams inbound you can see there on the left-hand side. So recycling residuals coming out of recycling plants. C&I material that's coming in direct from customers, and also C&D material. That's feeding in, and happy to say that at this point we are at over 97% diversion from landfill. So as I mentioned, quite a lot of that going into commodity markets already, and the rest of it going to PEF. We still do have this niggling little 3% that's going to landfill down at the bottom. Still looking, we've got a couple of projects in the pipeline to improve our process and reduce that number even further. I don't think we'll ever get it to zero, but we are pushing to improve that number. The other thing here is a real gap on the left-hand side in terms of inputs. There's nothing in there in terms of mixed waste at the moment and mixed residuals. So as a way of addressing that, Cleanaway has also put through quite a large investment into a new transfer station that we built in Western Sydney. It's about half an hour west of the PEF plant. Now, as with most transfer stations, we've got a throughput capacity. We're licensed up to 300,000 tonnes. But the critical thing we've done here is to build in some quite high technology sorting capability into that plant. The sorting capability is, first of all, to strip out commodities wherever we can. But secondly, it also separates wet waste from dry, so that even the wet waste streams coming in that have got quite a lot of dry material in them, we're able to strip that dry material out and feed it through into the PEF plant, so that we're actually getting diversion rates. So we're still working on a couple of projects again here in the pipeline. This site's only been open since January of this year. But we are aiming for sort of 30 to 40% diversion from landfill of the total stream, not just the dry material, but everything that comes through the gate, by using the two facilities in conjunction. The primary operational challenge we've had was around waste density. So these facilities are designed carefully essentially based on a cubic metre throughput rather than a mass throughput. And we designed that based on an assumption of the density of the material coming in. So the design was done based on quite a lot of audit data that was done around New South Wales, but also information coming from other states. And what we've learnt over the last 12 months is that the waste density, particularly in Sydney, is far lower than we'd anticipated, far lower than we'd expected in the design process. And the reason for that is in this photograph here. It's cardboard. Now, I'm sure all of you heard Mike Ritchie speaking this morning. Cardboard is one of the very few things that are intrinsically worth recycling. The cost of separating and baling and recycling this material is less than the commodity value. It is intrinsically commercially valuable to recycle, and yet we don't do it. There is a lot of cardboard coming from all streams, even from recycling residuals, but particularly from C&I and C&D customers coming through the gate. Tons of it every day, cardboard coming into the facility. Now, it's got calorific value. We can convert it into a fuel, that's fine. But it's not what this facility is designed to do, and it's also not what we should be doing as an environmentally responsible group of people. My concern and what we really need to do as more and more facilities like this come online that are able to recover energy out of the waste stream, we need to make sure we don't allow that to become a shortcut for people. It is too easy just to throw everything into a dry bin and send it off to a plant and have a clear conscience because it's not going to end up in landfill. That is not the best outcome for things like this. If you look at this photograph, there's probably 10 minutes work that could have been done on site to separate all of that and recycle the cardboard. And it wasn't done. And it's one of hundreds of loads that come in looking very much like that. So for all of you in the room, we've all got influence in the markets, whether it's customers or collectors or the citizens in our communities. Please, please, please don't let this type of facility become a shortcut in the waste hierarchy. We need to make sure that we're still pushing for the best possible outcome. That's it for me. Any questions?